Hey everybody, I'm G Marks and welcome back for another episode of Biz Books. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I am speaking with Jocelyn Davis, who is the author of Insubordinate, 12 New Archetypes for Women Who Lead. Jocelyn, first of all, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thrilled to be here. When was the book officially published? How long has it been on the market?
It was published March 21st of this year.
That's great. So we've got a good 3-4 months under our belt so far as to the date that we're recording this, and that is good to hear. Tell me, Jocelyn, a little bit about yourself and how you came to write the book.
Sure. Well, so my background is in the corporate learning industry, and I was a head of R&D for a leadership development firm and I was with that firm for 25 years. So that was my whole Act One.
Right.
And now I'm on Act Two as a writer. But the reason that I wrote this book, the spark for this book was actually getting fired for insubordination. Direct quote there. So at the peak of my career as in R&D for this corporate learning firm, I was let go for being, quote, insubordinate.
A
And
rebel.
at the time, I thought, wow, I've got to write a book about this someday. So I did.
It makes complete sense. Do you have much experience in writing beforehand?
Well, yes, in the sense that our whole business was creating leadership and sales training workshops.
Right.
So I was accustomed to designing and developing content. And then I did write a book with that company called Strategic Speed, which was about accelerating how to accelerate execution. And so that was my first book. And then after I left, I wrote more books about leadership.
Great. All right, that is great. Well, this book was really interesting. I enjoyed reading it, but then again, I'm a middle-aged man, so I guess the question is like, who is your audience for this book? Is it guys like me? Is it also obviously women? Who do you want to read it?
Yeah, obviously it's women. The subtitle of the book is 12 New Archetypes for Women Who Lead.
Mhm.
So that's the main audience. But as I like to say, I don't care what gender you identify as. What I care about is whether you can identify with women.
Right.
Can you identify with women's stories, with their adventures, with their successes, and what they have to teach, and what women's leadership archetypes have to teach all of us? So I found that in talking about this book and teaching workshops on it, that actually a lot of the guys get a lot of value out of it, because it's about sort of focusing on a different type of leader than we're used to seeing.
Sure. Little background, like I have a 10-person company outside of Philadelphia, and we sell mostly to small and mid-sized businesses. We have about 600 clients. The demographics as much as I do. I mean, 40 to 45% of them are female led now. I mean, it is women leaders and women business owners have really grown as a demographic among business owners around the country. And because I'm such a horrible judge of people and still haven't figured out how, humans in general, I read this book and you give different archetypes of women leaders. It kind of helps me when I'm meeting prospective clients or dealing with clients that are females, or women owned, companies. It kind of helps me a little bit better understand them.
Yeah.
And that might be, I'm assuming that's also part of the intention of the book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really sort of three big lessons, if you will, that I think we can all take away from it. One is understanding our own strengths and the strengths that we may not realize that we have,
Right.
and that we can, lean into a little bit more fully and more confidently. The second is understanding that we have more range than we might suspect.
Right.
So, I talk about these 12 archetypes, and they're things like the Amazon and the empath and the Snow Queen and the Witch and the Empress. These are all things that in my view, we, especially as women, have available to us, and we may
Right.
be comfortable with one or two and not so comfortable with the others, but we can tap into them. And so that's something that I want people to be able to do. And then the third thing, as you said, is I'd like people to be able to start appreciating these styles or these ways of being in other people, in women and men alike, but women especially, because we all tend to, as human beings, we tend to sort of look askance at people who are doing things in a way that we wouldn't do them, and kind of give them that side eye. And my argument is that, we should stop with so much of the side eye and do a little bit more appreciating and learning.
I agree. I agree. So you divided the book up into 4 parts, and you have approximately, because one of the parts only have 2 people, which I'm going to ask you about later. But you have the 12 archetypes. You've got them divided among the 4 parts, and the 4 parts, for those of you guys that are watching or listening to this, and haven't picked up the book yet, part 1 is fire, earth, and part 2 is earth, water, and part 3 is water, air, and part 4 is air, fire. Explain to us what that means, what those parts mean.
Yeah, so the 12 archetypes, and I have them on a wheel. The wheel has 4 quadrants that you just named, but the wheel is based on the 4 classical elements: fire, earth, water, air, which are obviously not scientific, but have incredible, just an incredible history and resonance in art, in spirituality, in literature, and they're still used today in many different realms, as a way to sort of understand human nature and understand different styles, if you will. So that's where the archetypes came from, and each archetype is placed on the wheel, according to fire, earth, water, air. The elements have different associations with them. So with fire, it's like, it's hot, it's direct, it's fiery.
Right.
Water, in contrast, tends to be is cool, it's dark, subtle, maybe a little mysterious. And then earth is down, solid, grounded, and air is much more up, sort of intellectual, airy, mercurial. So all those sort of personality traits, if you will, can form these 12 different styles or archetypes.
So for this conversation, I took notes on all the archetypes, and I can bounce around and pull out a few, and we can discuss them. I don't know if you have a favorite 1 or 2 that you'd like to discuss, or how you'd like the conversation to go. But I'm more than happy to throw a few out to you first, if you'd like to discuss.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
but I truly would like to get you. Okay, so let's start with it. I get drawn to the ones where you can't really figure out what the archetype is just by the name, and the second archetype that you name in the book is the Amazon. um and you use 2 examples, one with a name that I can't even pronounce, Lysistrata, is that good?
Lysistrata,
There you
yes.
go. Okay. And the other one is Lacey. So let's talk about the Amazon first. What do you mean by the Amazon? And tell us a little bit about Lysistrata and Lacey.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting that you picked that one, because the Amazon is actually one of the archetypes that women are often sort of encouraged to be. It's like, you got to lean in, and you need to
Right.
try harder and be more forceful. And that's what the Amazon is about. The Amazon is the happy warrior. She is the woman who likes to fight for what she
Right.
wants, and push forward and do all of that. So that the real life example, because for each of these archetypes, I have a sort of literary legendary
Yep.
example, and then a real life example of a woman that I knew
And
and
Lace
know.
as well, but if we Lysistrata was the literary example, is a Greek warrior, right? And
Yes.
her
Yeah.
whole
Well,
thing was bringing
she was
together
a
women to
Greek,
fight.
yeah, Greek matron,
Yeah.
actually. Not a warrior, but a Greek matron.
Okay.
So I'll talk about her in a sec. But Lacey, the woman the real life woman, was a project manager at the company where I worked. She later left and founded her own company, which was also a training company.
Hmm.
But the interesting thing about Lacey and about the Amazon in general is that Lacey was not what you would call she didn't come across as a good listener.
Okay.
She did not come across as somebody who was going to like listen to the customer and do all that, the consultative selling stuff that we're all told to do. She would come in and she would understand what the client wanted, but then she would tell you what to do. And a friend of mine who worked closely with her as I did said, he was always baffled by how successful she was because she was so not consultative. She was just very like, this is what you should do. Okay, well, you could do that, but it's not going to work.
Sure.
So, you need to do what I say. But it worked for her because she really did have the experience and the knowledge. B, she came across always as fighting in the client's best interest. So it wasn't just do what I say because I want you to. It was, here's what we're going to do because I understand what you're asking me for. You've brought me in as the expert. And so here is my expert advice, and trust me because it's going to work.
Right.
And one of the things I learned from her is that when clients bring you in as and are going to pay you money to tell them what to do, they don't want somebody who's going to stand around and be like, oh, well, what do you think?
Couldn't agree more.
They want somebody who's going to tell you what to do. That's what they're paying for. So Lacey really tuned into that. And then the Lysistrata example I love because it's it's actually based on she comes from a play by Aristophanes, Greek playwright, and it's a farce. It's a comedy, is the play, and the whole thing is about the women go on a sex strike because they don't want the men to be at war. They're sick of war, and so they want to stop the war, and so they go on a sex strike. And Lysistrata organizes this strike and does this fabulous job of bringing all her allies together and then pushing forward with the strike, and ends up bringing the war to an end.
So not exactly a warrior in the definition of a typical warrior, but in another way, she's an
anti-war warrior.
That's a good way to put it. And she knew, like you said, she knew exactly what she wanted, which is something that is common among women that you call Amazons. And I guess people like that, you talk about just within the chapter about how to deal with that Amazon type. So let's get back to Lacey, the project manager, who is, she knows what she wants. She's giving her opinion. How do you deal with somebody like that? If you have somebody like that either working for you, or if you are that kind of a person and you know that you might potentially be rubbing people the wrong way.
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about in the book is kind of the do's and don'ts for each archetype, because each archetype can kind of lean into their strengths, but then also needs to be aware that of the pitfalls, if you will, of their style. And if you're a little too comfortable with your particular archetype, then you can go astray. So with the Amazon, if you are an Amazon, it really is about having that awareness that that's the way you like to operate, and that it can rub people the wrong way. So you may need to draw upon, reach across the wheel, so to speak, to your opposite, which in this case might be the empath or maybe even the escapist, and understand what are some of those strengths. How can I kind of step back a little bit, ask more questions, listen a little bit harder, so it's about self-awareness and finding that balance.
And oh God, what was her name? Lacey. Like Lacey, you have to basically hopefully draw people to your side, create allies as well, correct? By doing that.
Yes, creating allies is very big for the Amazon, something that Lysistrata does very well, and Lacey very well too. She was and is wonderful to work with because she was straight up, no BS. But she also really understood that that she needed her people. She needed her, her contractors, her employees, she needed them to succeed. So she was very comfortable, handing off the work, and she was not a micromanager at all. So that was something that everybody really appreciated about her.
One question I have about all these different archetypes, Jocelyn, is that if I'm reading the book and I'm female, a lot of the advice that you give in the book is how to be like one of those archetypes, like how you could emulate them, or how can I be more of the Amazon, which is more of the sort of the emphatic standalone person who wants to move forward with whatever, without bringing in too much discussion, like Lacey did. Is that something that you learn, or is that something that you're just sort of born with? And we'll talk about just females, because you can make similar characteristics of male leaders as well. But is Lacey, for example, did she learn to be an Amazon, or has she always been an Amazon?
I think I think all of us have always been sort of what we are.
Right.
We all have as I say, sort of a home archetype that we are comfortable with.
Right.
But my argument, and I sometimes get in a bit of trouble for saying this, and I'll say it anyway,
Okay.
is that women in particular, that our strength, our biggest strength, is our range, our ability to draw upon these different qualities and kind of move around the wheel in this way. I like to say that we're shapeshifters. Men in general, and whether this is nature or nurture, it doesn't really interest me that much. For whatever reason, I think men tend to have a more direct, kind of linear focus, which is great. I mean, it's the hero's journey. It's march along to the goal, and that's good. Women, I think, have spent kind of too much time being encouraged to do that. It's like, find your strength, do your thing, and march along the line in a linear fashion. I think our strength is really the opposite, is that we have within us a lot of different ways to be, ways to move, and hopefully by tapping into more of those different ways of being, those archetypes, we can be more successful.
All right, makes sense. All right, another archetype that you talk about, which interested me, was the claimant. So my question is, for you on the claimant, can you describe for us, explain to us what the claimant archetype is, and also can you tell me what BATNA is and why that's important for being a claimant?
Oh, okay, yes. So claimant is the next one along the wheel from the Amazon. So these are all the fire earth archetypes. The claimant is the woman who understands the non-negotiables. Like she plants her feet. The image of her in the illustrations in the book is she's like folding her arms, and she's there. She's standing, feet on the ground. So the claimant is the woman who stands her ground. BATNA is a decades old concept, very, very classic concept from negotiation theory, originated by Fisher and Urey, the two guys in Getting to Yes, was the classic book, negotiation book. And BATNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. And the key thing in one of the key skills in when you're negotiating, is to understand what the best alternative is to a negotiated agreement. So in other words, if you can't reach agreement, what are you going to do? And the stronger your BATNA is, the stronger your alternative is to a negotiated agreement, then the stronger position you have. So if you're going into, in the example I give in the book, going in to negotiate to buy a new car, if you're in the situation where your car broke down, you have a horrendous commute, you have no car to borrow, there's no public transportation, and you've got to get a car like tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
and your BATNA is not good. So you've got to, you're not in a strong position there.
Sure.
But conversely, if you're just shopping around, maybe you want a new car, maybe you don't. If you don't get a new car today, oh well, you have a friend whose car you can borrow, or your old car is fine. Then your BATNA is strong, and so then you're in a strong position.
So
So it's
how can you use that to emulate, the claimant?
well, so the claimant is the woman who is an expert
Mm-hmm.
at negotiation, and particularly understanding what is what her source of power is, like what
Sure.
her platform is.
Right.
Is she in a position of power so that she can negotiate, or does she need to give way? And so she's good at sort of understanding what her BATNA is, and then
Right.
if it's not very strong, figuring out a way to make it stronger so that she's in a stronger position.
So you gave the example of going into buying the car. I mean, I guess a claimant wouldn't put herself into that situation because she has like hardly anything to negotiate there.
Right.
So she's making sure that she has a BATNA, like, which is basically alternatives to
A
whatever is being
strong
negotiated.
BATNA. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that makes complete sense. All right, let's skip down a little bit. You give another archetype is the Snow Queen, who has, as you describe, her disdainful pride. So, explain to me the Snow Queen and what we need to know about her.
Yeah. So I am a Snow Queen.
Okay.
It's me. I am
You
the
took
Snow
away my
Queen.
last question.
Yes.
So go ahead. It's
I
fine.
am the Snow Queen. So the Snow Queen is perhaps my favorite, I guess. But yeah, so the Snow Queen is proud. She's aloof, quietly strong, an
Jocelyn,
introvert.
you literally say, and I'm reading this from your book, a Snow Queen is in most men's mind a frigid bitch.
Yes. Yes.
Although
Yeah.
you do say the
Well,
real picture is much more complex. So
It is much
carry
more
on.
complex. Yeah. No, I was caught, and I say this often in the book, a friend of mine, male friend, once said that I was uptight and unfriendly.
Okay.
Uptight and unfriendly. And I've never let him live that
Forget that.
down.
Right.
Never let him forget it. But I am actually. I mean, it's true, and this is where it comes into. We come back to sort of owning your who you are
Yeah.
and how you can make that work for you. So, I mean, the Snow Queen, yeah, she can be uptight and unfriendly, but she's also coolly analytic. Tends to not get sucked into drama. She's able to kind of rise above drama and not get derailed by those things. So she's cool-headed. She is not one of the mistakes I think people make about the Snow Queen is thinking, well, she doesn't care. She does care,
Sure.
but she does not, as I say, doesn't sort of let herself get rattled by. So she's got an even keel and doesn't get swayed by emotion. So this can be a very strong sort of leader.
Sure.
And speaking for myself, I was able in tough times. One of my the good things about me as a leader was that in tough times I was able to keep a cool head and kind of guide my team through
Yeah.
through the mess.
Yeah. Yeah. A Snow Queen person, you, for example, is the kind of person you want to have in the foxhole with you when things really get rough.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like it's an even sort of head. So, the obviously the point of of the book is is helping women identify which type of architect they are, and then leverage that architect's strengths, right? Like lean in and take advantage of it, but fully live it. So, okay, you're the Snow Queen. What what will you be doing to leverage? Like what strengths do you have, or does the Snow Queen have, that you want to sort of take to the next level as it is to really take
Mhm,
advantage
mhm.
of your strengths?
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's really there's two equally important ways to go here. One is understanding how to leverage your own strengths, and then second is to understand where you may need to tap into some other strengths. So for
Okay.
me, one of my sort of examples of where I got into some trouble because I wasn't, sufficiently aware, I think, of I hadn't written this book yet. So one of the things about the Snow Queen is that she doesn't like to be told that she is wrong. Doesn't like to be wrong. So if she gets stuck in, as I have, in that sort of Snow Queen mode, then it can be really triggering when somebody sort of points that out and says, "Oh, what, you're so perfect. Like, why, you can never be wrong."
Right.
So there was one time when I had this very tense email exchange with my boss where he said, "Oh, Jocelyn, do you ever consider that you might be wrong?" And I was triggered by that.
Yeah.
And I lashed back. This is what actually eventually led to me being fired for being insubordinate.
Sure.
So I lashed back. Had I been more aware of my sort of Snow Queen type, then I think I would have been better off, because first of all, I might have known, okay, this is a trigger for you.
Yeah.
I could have stepped back and said, all right, no, I'm going to use my Snow Queen powers here. I'm going to step back, I'm not going to get sucked in. I'm going to analyze this more calmly. And then I might have drawn upon a different archetype, particularly the Amiga archetype, which is the person who really loves to connect and is
Yeah.
able to, kind of make connections, make friends. So I might have leaned into that archetype a little bit more. And instead of just like what I did, which is to like fire back an angry email, I might have called him and said, "Hey, what's going on? Let's talk this out." So so it's really about being able to understand myself as a Snow Queen. What are my strengths? How can I draw upon those strengths? But then also, how can I draw upon some other strengths?
I think that's such a great point that if you can take the time and think and identify yourself to one of these archetypes, then when people do call you out on something, you can look to that archetype and say like, well, yeah, okay, that's me, because that's the kind of person that I am. So,
Mhm.
in other words, I guess your boss or whoever at that time, he was only identifying, I guess, what was true, but it was your reaction to that. And maybe people can
Right.
react better to events around them if they understand what kind of person that they are, what kind of archetype that they are.
Exactly.
So it's a really interesting point that you do that. You also mentioned that you would have taken sort of some of the advice from the Amiga, because it's more of a social person, friendly person, or whatever. I I would have thought you would have taken something from the Jesteress, just because it's
Mhm.
more,
Yeah.
lighter.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Jesteress and what type of archetype that is, and
Yeah. Yeah.
how
The
we can identify.
Jesteress is one of my colleagues recently said, "Oh yeah, the Jesteress, that's one of the most underappreciated types of leader, is the person who can bring levity, can lighten up a situation, can make people laugh, can laugh at herself." And yeah, that's an archetype that I could have drawn upon in that
Yeah.
situation as well,
Well, we all
for
could,
sure.
actually. We all could,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's really it's underappreciated. The example that I use,
You
the
used the
real life
pillow book,
example
I
in that
think,
chapter
right?
is my mom.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, who has passed away. But growing up with her, she was a Foreign Service wife. My dad was in the Foreign Service, a
Mhm.
diplomat, and in those days, there was a husband and wife team, really.
Mhm.
So she was definitely of equal importance in that career,
Mhm.
as the sort of the professional hostess, wife of the diplomat. But she was a jesteress, and in many cases she would just in these very potentially fraught cross-cultural situations, which is always an issue for leaders, right? How do you lead across cultures when you have these, dealing with people who are very different from you, coming from very different places? And what my mom did was she always used humor,
Mm.
good humor, to bridge those gaps.
Do you think that, these archetypes change over time? I mean, can a young woman in her 20s, be a snow queen and 20 years later evolve into being, and I don't, maybe evolve is a bad word, but change
Mm.
into being a jesteress? Or do you think that once you're one of these archetypes, you're really always going to be that kind of an archetype?
I think I think we are who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that changes. I think our, sort of fundamental personality doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, I think women especially, and men, all of us can, we don't give ourselves enough credit for the evolving that we can do, for the growth that we can do. And as I say, I think women especially tend to not give ourselves enough credit for the many different ways that we can lead, the many different sort of styles that we can take on. I've heard from many women who have read this book, and have said, oh, I've always been kind of scared of leadership books, management. I'm not really a leader. I'm not really a corporate type.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more sort of laid back or softer style. I'm not into that hard charging stuff. It sort of
Mm-hmm.
scares me. And then they read this book and say, oh, I kind of see now that there's a lot of ways to
Sure.
lead, and maybe I'm not the Amazon. Maybe I'm an escapist. Maybe I'm
Right.
an empath. Maybe I'm a snow queen, but I can still be a leader, and I could even like dip my toe into some of these other waters, and try some other things out.
We are all our own, our worst judges of ourselves. I mean, we see what we want to see when we look in the mirror, and sometimes we ignore things about ourselves that aren't pleasant or that we don't want to think about. So, in a journey of trying to identify what kind of an archetype that we all are, um, have you had any of your readers or anybody that you've talked to that have identified with some of these archetypes? Have you ever recommended that you have people from the outside read this book and tell you what they think you are? In other words, if you had 10 of your friends read this book, would they call you the Snow Queen, or would they call you something else? Or, have you ever thought about, is that a way, or is that a help for people to try and figure out what type of architect they have, is to get input from people on the outside?
That's interesting. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. Um, when you say, did I get input on how people see me? I think I took the input that I already had, like, oh, you're uptight and unfriendly, or,
Well, you're very
you're
honest
an
with yourself.
introvert, or
Yeah.
yeah. So, and being a writer, I mean, that was all sort of material for me. Um, so, but yeah, I do think that this could be an interesting sort of 360 feedback
Right. Right.
uh, method. Is, what archetype do you think I am? How am I coming across? Because sometimes there's a difference between how we envision ourselves inside and how we're coming across to the outside
Agreed.
world. So yeah.
Agreed. And it almost seems as if, if you were selling this book or doing classes or helping out larger organizations that have, a significant, level of female employees, it's kind of interesting to have, a bunch of people read this book and then make an evaluation of their coworkers if they, feel comfortable doing that, as to what type of architect that worker would be.
Yeah.
Um, I guess if people are willing to hear that feedback, they might be sort of pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised by what they hear from
Hmm.
people. I
Hmm.
mean, you have one architect in here, and we're getting near the end because I don't want to give away the entire book here, Jocelyn. So I want people to read this book, but you do have, of course, the architect of the witch, so which, goes against my whole suggestion to say, hey, well, you should have people read this and stuff. Because you can imagine you had 10 of your friends read it and they all say that you're the witch. But then again, is the witch bad? Or any of these archetypes bad? But the witch in particular, tell us about that
No,
archetype.
no, none of them are bad. And in fact, the whole they have been portrayed as bad for
Yes,
sure.
right.
And women have been very accustomed over the centuries to hearing these words directed at us as bad, right? You're the
Yep.
witch. You're the and every one of them every one of these archetypes has sort of a too much um, epithet associated with them. So, you know, the Empress is too bossy and the Snow Queen is too cold. The escapist is too you know, weak or avoidant or whatever. And the witch is, you know, has been seen as just too too much
Ruthless.
in, yeah, ruthless. Um, but my intent with this book is that we can reclaim these labels
Sure.
to our own benefit and find what is positive and strong and helpful in each one of them. And with the witch, the thing that is she is ruthless. She is judiciously ruthless. But the other thing about the witch is that she is expert at crossing those boundaries. So in legends, you know, witches were able to sort of cross the bridge between the real world, or the, you know, our world, and the supernatural
Yeah.
world,
The non-human world.
the non-human world. Yes. And in real life, witches are you know, witches in professional roles are also good at crossing those boundaries, but they may be boundaries between cultures. They may be bridges between different types of people, different styles, between different professions. So witches are very, you know, a real shapeshifter, and is very good at taking risk. So is willing to take on risk because she is passionate about what she's passionate about, and is willing to, you know, so take that risk, to take those leaps, and really lead in a very bold way.
All right. So before I let you go, I can't resist testing you a little bit on some of these archetypes. If if you're uncomfortable or drawing a blank, I completely understand. But if I gave you a name, a couple names of some famous women, I'm curious to see if you can come up with what archetype you think they are.
Okay.
Okay. So for example, let's start with the most famous of them. To me, right, living is Hillary Clinton. What type of architect do you think Hillary Clinton is?
Yeah, I'm looking at the my archetypes wheel here,
Yeah,
so I can
it's
have it
fun to
in
do
front of
this.
me. Yeah, Hillary Clinton, I would say, is I think she may be I think she's up in that air fire quadrant. So I think she's probably an empress.
Empress, not a
Yeah.
jesteress. I never took her to be that. Although I
Yeah,
do know she has quite
although
a sense of
she's,
humor.
you know, it's interesting when people who have met her
Yeah,
personally,
yeah.
they say it's astonishing because she is very funny, very warm, very she laughs, she has this big laugh, you know. So I think she's, yeah, she's up in that quadrant with the empress, the jesteress, the witch, maybe.
That's very interesting. You know, it's funny that you say that because she, I don't know if you've ever heard, but she did right after she lost the election. She did a long interview with Howard Stern, and all the, you know, everything was behind her at that point, and she was amazing. She was
Yeah,
hilarious, you know,
yeah,
relaxed, you know, joking around. It was like just not what you're used to seeing her, you know,
yeah,
on TV. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
And you kind of wish we got a little bit more of that during the election. Maybe things would have turned out different, but that's a whole other story. Um,
yeah.
okay, let me, if you don't mind, and if you don't know, I don't know, do do you know Kim Kardashian?
I really don't follow the Kardashians.
Would you admit
No.
it if you did?
You know, I would, but yeah, no, I just don't. I don't know.
Okay, how about Taylor Swift?
Ooh, Taylor Swift. That's a good one. I do follow Taylor Swift.
She's awesome.
She is awesome. Wow. Uh, you know, hmm, she may be really the mesmerist.
Okay, now
She's
we
such
didn't
a,
we
'cause
didn't
the
discuss the
mesmerist,
mesmerist in this conversation. So just very quickly, without giving anything away
yeah,
in the book, what do you mean by the mesmerist?
the mesmerist is the storyteller. It's uh the person who mesmerizes, you know, who draws you in with stories, with her sort of yeah, it leaves you wanting more. So a performer. And yeah,
I
she
love
Taylor
that.
Swift is such a good, she's such a good songwriter and storyteller.
She really is. She's in the middle of re-recording all of her original works, because of this
Mhm.
copyright issue that she was under.
Yeah.
And she's just awesome. I'm assuming you didn't see her on tour. I couldn't get tickets.
I saw her in her first Speak Now tour in like 2009 or 11 or something. I don't know.
That is
Long
very
time
cool.
ago.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very cool. That's very cool. Well, Jocelyn, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. Jocelyn Davis is the author of Insubordinate 12 New Archetypes for Women Who Lead. Jocelyn, I know you're going on a book tour this fall. Tell us how we can find out more information about it and tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, so this tour is actually a multi-author tour. It's me and 15 other authors.
Cool.
They're all women. And the title of the tour is Beyond Lean In: Women Redefining Leadership. So the whole point of it is to look at leadership through sort of fresh lenses. Um, my book, but also all these other books by women who are really redefining what it means to lead. And you can find out more about it on my website, which is jocelynrdavis.com. And or follow me on LinkedIn, and I talk about it all the time. It's happening in September and October.
That is great. And before I let you go, I mean, besides making millions as a published author now, what else are you doing to I mean, now that you've put corporate work behind you, thank God. What are you doing with yourself now?
No, I write books now. I
Good.
am retired from Act One, moved on to Act Two, which is being an author, and I speak and do some workshops, but mostly I write. And I have just finished the manuscript for my next book, which is a memoir about a very drastic and interesting mental illness, brain illness that I suffered through a couple
Hmm.
years ago. So yeah, memoir.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating. All right, well, keep us in touch on that, and let's definitely you and I stay in touch as well. Appreciate you spending the time with us. Best of luck with the book. It's excellent. Again, it's called Insubordinate: 12 New Archetypes for Women Who Lead. I've been speaking with Jocelyn Davis. Everyone, my name is G Marks, and you have been watching and listening to Biz Books, where I talk to really smart people who write books like Jocelyn every other week. I will be back in 2 weeks with another interview with another great author as well. Thanks so much for watching or listening. We will see you again soon. Take care.